Like and subscribe right now, or this spider will crawl on your face when you're sleeping.
10 bone-chilling facts about the Titanic no one knew. The Titanic was the world's largest passenger ship at 882 feet in length. It was also the largest man-made moving object on Earth. As a result, everyone wanted to travel in it, but not everyone could afford a ticket, especially first class. The first class tickets ranged from about $150, which is about $1,700 today. Second class tickets ranged between $60, which is about $700 today, and third class was between $15 and $40, which is about $170 and $460. The ocean liner was therefore billed as a paragon of luxury travel. It was also said that it was an unsinkable ship, so when it sank off the coast of Newfoundland on its maiden voyage to New York City, it became one of the most famous tragedies in maritime history. And today, we navigate through 10 bone-chilling facts about the Titanic no one knew. Subscribe if you haven't, as we begin. Number 10. Near collide before sinking. Did you know that the Titanic had a near collision with another ship before the big incident? As the Titanic was leaving Southampton, it nearly collided with another ship dubbed the New York. The distance between the two ships was just about 4 feet from each other. This was followed by an order full astern. The New Yorker was then pushed away by Titanic's sudden burst of water from its port propeller. At that point, no one was hurt, although some passengers thought that was a bad omen. Little did they know, they were right. Before we move on, I've got a little challenge for you that'll take 5 seconds to complete. So here's the deal. You just leave a like on this video, smash that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and you will get 25 years of amazing luck. Try it, it really works. Number 9. Deaths during the building of the ship. The problems at the Titanic began well before the ship sailed. A couple of Titanic workmen died during the building of this ship. On May 31, 1911, James Dobbin was pinned beneath Titanic's hull just as the ship was launching. Efforts to rescue him by his colleagues were futile as his injuries were severe, and he passed on the next day. Other men who perished include Samuel Scott, John Kelly, William Clark, and Robert Murphy. According to reports, about 8 men perished, but only names of 5 are known. Do you know of any other Titanic builders who perished? Share with us in the comments down below. Titanic and her sister ship Olympic's construction took place virtually in parallel. Olympic's keel laid down first on December 16, 1908, and Titanic on the 31st of March, 1909. Both ships took about 26 months to be built and followed much of the same construction process. Number 8. Passengers traveling under false names. The mysteries of the Titanic never cease. Did you know that at least 15 passengers were traveling under false names in the Titanic? One of such passengers was Alfred Nerney, who went by the name Baron Alfred von Drachtstedt on the ship. He was dressed up a notch higher than others with the expensive items that he bought. He presented a second-class ticket and requested to be moved to the first-class section. His wish was granted as the Titanic purser assumed Alfred was of aristocratic status. He was a clever one, don't you think? Another passenger who went by a fake name was Mitchell Navratil, who was having marital problems with his wife France. He took his 2 sons on the ship without his wife's permission. He traveled under the name Lewis Hoffman. The Titanic had all kinds of passengers from 30 different nationalities, mostly from the United States, Ireland, and England. The ship was also home to a few gamblers who also used fake names. They were Charles H. Romaine, George Boy Brereton, and Harry Kid Homer. White Star had alerted and posted a message warning passengers about the card sharps on board. Have you ever traveled under a fake name? What were your reasons? Share with us in the comment section down below. Number 7. Titanic's captain was planning to retire before his death. Captain Smith was a veteran of the seas and the captain in charge on that fateful day. He was planning to retire at the time of Titanic's voyage at 62 years. Sadly, it was his last voyage, but not the way he was expecting. Captain Smith spent the last evening dining with some of the most affluent first-class passengers in the ship, unaware that fateful day was his last meal with most of the passengers who had also perished. Smith was one of the world's most experienced sea captains with only a few mishaps during his years of service. He had successfully commanded the Baltic, Adriatic, and the Olympic ship. After having done all man could have done for the safety of the passengers and the crew during the Titanic incident, he left them with a final message: be British. What do you think he meant? Share with us. Number 6. Strange odor in the air before the ship collapsed. As the Titanic drew closer to the iceberg, the crew members and passengers began smelling a strange smell in the air. So, what was the smell? It was the smell of the iceberg. According to scientists, you can smell icebergs before you approach them. This is possible because icebergs break from glaciers and the minerals in them give a distinctive odor as the iceberg melts. A lucky survivor, Elizabeth Schutz, after the incident said that the odor smelled like it came from a clammy cave. However, the Titanic crew and passengers were unaware that they smelled their oncoming death. No one doubts that the ship collided at a high speed with an iceberg off the coast of Newfoundland. However, an Irish journalist, Cianan Maloney, who has been studying the Titanic for over 30 years in his documentary, highlights that the sinking of the ship that was praised for its unsinkability may have been accelerated by a giant coal fire in its hull that appeared to have started as long as 3 weeks before it set off on its fateful journey to New York. Would you agree? Number 5. The Titanic could have avoided the iceberg. Frederick Fleet, who was a British sailor and survivor of the Titanic, believes that the Titanic could have avoided the iceberg had binoculars been used instead of being kept away in the officer's locker. It's thought that if the crew members used the binoculars, they would have noticed the iceberg earlier. Frederick Fleet was on duty that fateful day when he spotted an iceberg ahead. The iceberg was steaming at near full speed. 2 hours and 40 minutes later, the Titanic slipped beneath the waves. Binoculars are versatile tools that provide enlarged images of distant objects. However, it's important to note that during the Titanic's years, lookouts rarely used binoculars. They sat at the crow's nest at the top of the ship, higher than the bridge, to look out for icebergs, ships, or any other hazards with only their eyes. The binoculars of the ship were locked in a locker, and an officer who went to work on a different ship took the key to the locker with him. Frederick Fleet passed on 53 years after the Titanic. He experienced depression in 1965 and hanged himself. It's incredibly sad. Do the misfortunes of the Titanic follow the survivors all along? What do you think? And that leads us to our next countdown. Number 4. Some people experienced nightmares after the incident. Nightmares are normally associated with negative feelings when we are anxious or we fear we may be awoken by nightmares. Although nightmares are common among children, they can happen at any age. Some of the survivors and relatives of the Titanic experienced nightmares that horrified them for years. For example, Eva Hart, a survivor, experienced nightmares for years. At the time of the incident, she was only 7 years old and was on board with her parents. Her dad perished in the Titanic. She made it out with her mom, but her life was never the same again, as she was plagued with nightmares for 16 years. After the death of her mother, she decided to book a ticket with a ship heading to Singapore to confront her fears head-on. However, she locked herself in her cabin for 4 days straight until the stewardess made her get out on the deck. After the trip, her nightmares disappeared. The strangest of them all is claims by some of the relatives of the Titanic passengers who said that they woke up during the time of the ship sinking with visions of people drowning. What do you think? Have you ever experienced nightmares after a tragic incident? How did you cope with the nightmares? Do you believe you have the instincts to know when your loved one is in danger? Let us know in the comments down below. Number 3. Baby almost thrown out of the boat. Some of you may heard of this tale. Titanic lifeboat number 11 was packed with 70 passengers. It was so crowded that passengers began tossing out unnecessary items into the water to create space. One item that was tossed out was mistaken to be a bundle of clothing. Just as it was about to be tossed out, it let out a cry. This is when the shaken passengers realized that they were about to trash out a baby. Oh no! That must have been a tormenting situation to an already disaster. And with that, it's now time for today's best pick. Today's photo was sent to us by a subscriber, so if you come across a photo online and want to know more details about it, just send it over to us. We might even feature it in our future video. Number 2. Sculpture underwater. The picture was taken from the Cancun Underwater Museum of Art in Mexico. Scuba diving is probably one of the most popular activities while touring the museum. The photo is of a sculpture underwater. If you want to see it and take pictures, you need to be a deep-sea diver. The museum is devoted to the art of conservation. It has a total of 500 sculptures, most by British sculptor Jason D. Carris Taylor, and the others by 5 Mexican sculptors. 3 of the galleries are submerged between 3 to 6 meters deep in the ocean at the Cancun National Marine Park. It officially opened in November 2010. The Titanic has been sitting on the seafloor, 370 miles southeast off the coast of Newfoundland, for 106 years now. Maybe they should create an underwater museum there, don't you think? Number 1. Saved by the bottle. This one is pretty interesting. Many passengers anxious to save their lives jumped into the bone-chilling 28 degrees water. However, Chief Baker Charles Jowen took an interesting approach. As the ship was sinking, Charles went to his cabin to drown down a bottle of whiskey. After he had had enough of the drink, he staggered into the water and began paddling around. In a state of drunkenness, he barely noticed the cold water, and he stayed in the water for 2 hours before he was safely rescued to the lifeboat. This is ironic as many passengers died of hypothermia in a quarter of that time. Heat loss through the skin primarily happens through radiation and speeds up when skin is exposed to wind or moisture. If cold exposure is due to being immersed in cold water, heat loss can occur 25 times faster than it would if exposed to the same air temperature. Alcohol is a vasodilator. It causes blood vessels to dilate. When you have a drink, the volume of blood brought to the skin surface increases, making one feel warm. So does this mean that your temperature has risen after a drink? No, in fact, alcohol lowers a person's core body temperature, though a person may sweat when drunk. Charles was the last survivor to leave the Titanic and probably the last one to have a drink. And that was our countdown on 10 bone-chilling facts about the Titanic no one knew. Which one puzzled you the most? Share with us and thanks for watching. Until next time, keep safe.